and get some more in for Hacktoberfest this month.
Awesome. The live stream just went live, by the way. Probably should have done that earlier.
It's all good.
My bad.
It's my turn. I'm Adrian Villanueva. I'm a systems engineer at Mercury Insurance, and I haven't done too much in PowerShell in the past month. I guess the only thing notable is, and this was inspired by you guys, working with Elasticsearch and PowerShell to store, or basically just using it as an object store and then pulling stuff out of it to reference it. That's about it.
Sorry, making sure I have the chat up so I can alt tab from time to time.
Does Elasticsearch have the PowerShell library?
No, I'm just using Invoke Web Request.
Okay.
API.
Do you host Elasticsearch locally, or are you running the update?
Sadly, on my laptop. Yeah.
Wow.
It's and it's evolved into a network stack now.
Right.
I'm using Docker Compose.
The reason I ask is because I've tried spinning up Delta Stack, and I always run into RAM limitations, and it wants obscene amounts of memory. So
Yeah.
I just didn't know if you were paying them to do it, or if you.
Oh no, yeah, I'm running on 16 gigs of memory on my laptop, and
Okay.
yeah, it's not very performing, but
But it works.
It works, yeah, for
Yeah.
demo purposes.
It's a proof of concept.
Yeah. Yeah.
It works.
I'm Jeremy. I work at a company called L&L Wood Products from Chino. Kind of their only IT guy. So call it what you want. I have not done a lick of PowerShell in a month. I've been elbow deep in a network forklift upgrade and dumping MPLS in favor of some SD-WAN products. And yeah, but PowerShell never dies, so here I am.
And
I'm Rick. I'm just trying to learn it right now. I don't really do anything with PowerShell, so.
cool. All right, and Nate, if you want to go.
Yeah. So my name is Nate Ferrell. I'm a senior systems and DevOps engineer. Actually work for PennyMac. I'm also an AWS certified associate. I have all three associate certs from them. Last month, I've been doing probably too much PowerShell. Working a lot on the module that I'm going to demo today, PSProfile, as well as the other modules that I maintain, which are PSG Suite, so G Suite administration module, PowerShell, which is a CloudFormation abstraction layer, so template building makes it a lot easier. Things like that. Outside of that, outside of my open source projects, my day-to-day job, I also am super involved with TFS. We did just roll out Azure DevOps Server 2019 on-prem. So I'm the primary admin for that for our org. So I totally feel your pain on getting away from those JSON REST bodies. They're stupidly massive, and they're interesting to work with though. So yeah, we're in the process of migrating actually from TFS 2015. So we're pretty far behind, and pretty much all of our consumers of that TFS build are all on TFVC. So we're trying to shift them to a completely different platform and onto Git. So it's good times. My normal day-to-day, I do a lot of .NET SDK integrations with PowerShell, so I know we kind of touched on that a little bit. I am a big proponent of it as well. You can kind of solve a lot of problems where there really isn't a pre-built PowerShell solution for it, but there's usually a pretty extensive .NET library that can cover some of the same topics, kind of give you some shortcuts. So highly recommend that. There are some headaches that you can trip up over when you're doing that, but once you start playing with it a bit, it kind of just becomes, I feel, as natural as PowerShell sometimes.
Definitely. All right, well, without any further ado, feel free to get started.
Awesome. So today I'm here to talk to you guys on how to supercharge your productivity with PSProfile. Won't go over my whole spiel on who I am again, but what is PSProfile? So in this session, we'll cover what it is, some of the goals of the module and why I created it, how to get started pretty quick using the built-in configuration helper, as well as some of the help tools involved, how to convert existing profile content over to PSProfile, kind of what that looks like, using Power Tools to work fast. Power Tools are a section of PSProfile, really just kind of the name of these functions that provide some quality of life and productivity improvements. And then how to actually extend PSProfile with a custom plugin. If any of you have used like Poshbot, kind of adopts that same plugin concept where you can write something as simple as a PowerShell module that gives it a couple of commands that you can kind of leverage some of the things that like Power Tools has to offer with PSProfile to get really good tab completion, things like that. So what is PSProfile? PSProfile is a module that is really built to enable easy profile management. So when I kind of went down this whole path or rabbit hole, if you will, of customizing my own profile, I found that I started outsourcing like 6 other external scripts. I had all these functions that I had written that did little tasks here and there that were specific to like my job, or maybe just did things like create tickets in ServiceNow. Things that are just something I put together and they worked for me. Other things like PS readline settings and things that just make your environment a little bit nicer to work with. I started realizing that I was doing a ton of stuff on my profile, and it was hard to, say, shift that to another machine, and really just kind of keep track of what was running where. So I wanted a way to kind of contain that in a single pane of glass, if you will, something that ideally was transportable, something that I could easily really just bring from machine to machine and eliminate a lot of that extra headache of figuring out what I'm missing from my new machine from my old, I guess. So some of the goals of the module, I wanted to minimize everything that was on my profile down to literally just one line. So all you really need on your actual profile is just import module PSProfile. I wanted a way to manage all of my profile contents from a single location. No chasing down scripts, seeing what one script invokes, trying to figure out what or where a specific function is being stored. This just lets you store pretty much everything in a single configuration file. And again, I wanted it to be portable. That's one of the key things that PSProfile is used for. So if I'm building profile out on my laptop, for example, I can easily export my configuration, send it over to my desktop PC or my work PC, and then import it there. Super simple. Any existing configuration items, like if I had some setting that I saved and it's the same, it'll just ignore duplicates or overwrite with the new value. But anything new, it'll just pick that up really nicely. And again, I wanted it to be extensible. I think that something like a profile customization tool like this can be very subjective. So I wanted a way for somebody to use this module and really make it their own in a sense. Whether that's building a plugin for maybe your team to use at work where it leverages these special things that PSProfile offers, but it's really not something you would say publish to the PowerShell gallery or something like that. So this lets you kind of build on top of it and do some cool stuff. And then provide some quality of life improvements. So it comes with a number of functions built in that kind of are focused on that. Project folder aliasing and argument completion. So I'm a huge Git repo consumer. I think I have like 40 or something local repos that I'm constantly bouncing between. At work, I probably have the same, if not more. So I'm constantly trying to switch what path I'm working in, run a build script here, maybe enter a clean environment where I don't have anything else loaded, so I can just see and test in that clean environment. I use Visual Studio Code a lot, and some of the code CLI tools aren't really what I want. Like anything that you're piping in from standard input, it just opens it as a temporary text file. I want to be able to just open it as PowerShell, or give me a CSV like contents and open it as CSV to preview it like a table. Things like that. So I wrote open code, which wraps the code CLI, lets you basically set your file extension that you want to create for the temp file, and then it'll open that up. Also do some nice things like open it as like a background job, so you don't have to wait for your file to close to get your file back, things like that. So just kind of add some nice improvements to that code CLI. Start build script. So doing a quick search on GitHub, let me pull that up really quick. So on GitHub, if we look up file name build.ps1, we can see that a lot of people have build.ps1 scripts. It's something that I've seen in pretty much every open source, like CI/CD, how to do this type of thing. Any module development or continuous deployment, it usually starts off with a build.ps1. I've seen maybe one or two projects where it didn't kind of follow that pattern. So I thought, you know what, this is a really good way to kind of provide something that a lot of people are already doing. So I wrote start build script. As I mentioned before, I do a lot of work with .NET libraries, especially from PowerShell. And if you've worked with .NET libraries, you know that file locking is a pain, especially if you're importing an assembly, things like that. If you're writing C# commandlets, kind of the same thing. You won't be able to really destroy and recompile your code. You usually have to restart your session. It's a bit of a pain. So what start build script does, it will run your build script in a child process, so you don't have to worry about it. You can even pick the engine that you want to run it in. It will pull in all the parameters from your build script. So if you have special parameters that cover like a task list that has like a validate set, maybe you have like a switch to provide the summary, things like that, it'll just natively pull that in, and I'll demo that a little bit later. And it just does all this in a nice clean environment. So when your build is done, you know that you don't have to worry about that assembly being locked or what have you. It'll return you right back to where you were when you're done, and it just makes it nice and clean. And then enter clean environment. So this is kind of similar to start build script, but this will simply just drop you into a child process. It adds some PS readline settings to give you like history search, things that I always miss as soon as I do PowerShell no profile, and then gives you a special simple prompt that makes sure that you're aware that you're in kind of a quote unquote clean environment. You can specify to import the module that you built in your current directory, and it'll import it, so that's really the only thing that's available. Or you can just enter a clean environment and start running pester tests or what have you without worrying about having anything else already there interrupting that expectation. So getting started. So PSProfile comes with a lot of available help. It has a full wiki on the GitHub repository. There are help files for each concept with PSProfile. You can actually run git help about _ PSProfile star to see any of those. Then every function also has comment-based help. So it'll have at least one example for every function. It's something that I test for in my CI/CD pipeline. I want to make sure that every single bit is covered, so you really never have to leave your console if you're using it. It also has this handy configuration helper. So start PSProfile configuration helper is really kind of a quick start way to get an initial configuration set up. It walks you through the help of each concept, tells you kind of what it does, asks if you want to add some settings, and then it'll kind of walk you through what it's actually doing in the background. So I kind of recommend going through that configuration helper the first time you're ever using it. Once you've been using it for a little bit, you probably won't ever need to touch it, but this is really just there to provide first-time users a way to get familiar with the different commands and how to use it. All right, so let's test it out and see what that looks like. So, do I need to zoom in a little bit?
Yeah, probably a little bit.
All right.
Maybe a little bit more.
Perfect.
That looks good.
Awesome. All right, so right now I have a clean install of PSProfile. I did back up my configuration before using export PSProfile configuration, but we can actually see kind of what this looks like. So when PSProfile imports, you get a handy global variable just called PSProfile. Makes it really simple. So you can see most of these items are empty. I don't have any modules to install listed. PSProfile does come with one prompt that I've had a few people request. It's the prompt that I use, not the one that's currently there. So that's kind of the built-in prompt that will probably adjust from time to time, but it's pretty static. It's something that offers me a lot of value, so I usually use it as my daily driver. Script paths. So script paths are any external scripts that you would want to run when you actually import the module. So if you have an external script that you're calling from your profile, this is where you would add that path if you wanted to keep it as an external script. Doesn't really maintain the portability of that, but it lets you maybe run something that's specific to the machine you're on. Say you have a work script that adds some functions that you really don't need anywhere else. It kind of keeps that and just calls it by dot sourcing. Init scripts are any scripts that you can actually keep on your profile itself. So if, let's say you have PS readline settings or something that you really just have everywhere you're running PowerShell, those will actually let you store that on your configuration. For the refresh frequency, there are certain things that PSProfile will only do occasionally, default to once an hour, and that's refresh your project paths. It will run any background jobs like module installation, things like that. Just things that don't really need to run all the time because they probably don't change or something like that. Modules to import. So a lot of the times I'll see people importing specific modules whenever they load PowerShell, something like PoshGit or something like that. This will let you list out some modules that you want to just have imported anytime you start a new session. If you're using Visual Studio Code, a really popular one is the Editor Services Command Suite. So things like that. This will just make sure they're imported at that global scope whenever you start your PowerShell session. You can also provide like a required version if you want to do that. Pretty much anything that's pretty common on the import module commandlet, you can add in there as well.
So I have 2 questions so far.
Yeah.
First is, I see that you have PoshGit loaded right now because you have the Git prompt.
Yes.
Where is that actually being imported from here? Is that being imported by your SCR THQ prompt?
So PoshGit is actually, I find PoshGit pretty core to PowerShell whenever I'm using it, especially because I'm using Git a lot. And this is really a module that has a lot of Git convenience features. So I actually have it as a dependency for PSProfile itself. So by importing PSProfile, you'll pretty much immediately import PoshGit as well.
Got it. So that's why it's not explicitly there. My other question was on the, you mentioned that it refreshes every hour. How exactly is that triggered? For example, if I have a long-running task that, let's say it runs 90 minutes, is it going to trigger in another process? Or, well, rather another thread in the middle of my script running, or will it wait until the prompt is back up and the prompt is actually idle? So
you'll see down here that there's this last refresh kind of date time object. It's only handling that refresh by itself during the module import. So if you have a long-running session, it's not just going to spin up something and start refreshing stuff in the middle of that long-running command, or even if you have a session that's just sitting there. But if you were to start up, let's say, a new PowerShell prompt or a new console somewhere, that's when it would do that refresh if the last time it had refreshed had been greater than an hour ago.
I see. So it would only install new modules. So it's going to run your scripts every time, but certain things like installing modules will only happen at refresh frequency.
Yeah, things
Okay.
that really don't need to happen all the time. And you can adjust that. So if, let's say, you didn't want that to happen once an hour, if you wanted it to happen, let's say, once every 3 days or something, you could do that. Certain things that will typically trigger or require a refresh, like adding a new project path, they'll usually just trigger one right when you do that. And the refresh itself is pretty quick. It's maybe, like I have a pretty detailed configuration in full. My normal profile load with everything that I'm doing takes maybe 2 seconds on my PC. If I do a refresh with that, it'll probably take 4. So it's not like a huge minute-long process or anything like that, but it's something that I know we don't need to typically happen every time I create a new PowerShell session. So it just saves time as much as possible off your normal session load.
Got it. Okay. Sorry to derail you.
Oh, no worries. Please let me know if you have questions along the way. I'm happy to answer for sure. So project paths would be your Git folder. So I keep everything in a folder on my E drive just called Git that houses all of my normal open source projects on it. So I'll show you what that looks like once I actually add it. But what a refresh will do is it will look throughout every subdirectory in there, usually about 4 or 5 levels deep, look for a .git folder and any build.ps1 scripts, and then kind of build a dictionary back on the configuration that gives me some path aliases for those. And that's when it gets really fun, in my opinion. Git path map is just the dictionary that's built when you add a project path. Path aliases are any kind of short paths that I want to add in. So I'll show you what's included by default. So my user directory is just C users Nate. So certain prompts, if you want to take advantage of a path alias, and I'll show you some of the functions that are included to do that, it'll just replace this value with the key on the left, so just the tilde, for example. PSProfile does also include a secrets vault. One of the things that I had developed kind of outside of PSProfile that I was using personally was a non-public module called myconfig. And really what that was a way for me to safely store my own credentials in a PS credential object. That way, if I'm doing something like invoke command or authenticating against like ServiceNow, for example, I don't have to sit there and build a credential object or store my password in plain text. I can just call this module and I would have my credentials in a secure object. So I kind of integrated that with PSProfile with this concept called the vault. You can store PS credential objects. You can also store secure strings with kind of like a friendly name. So if you have like an API key that you want to store in there, it'll store it as a secure string protected with the data protection API. So it makes it really handy to have certain things. It's almost like KeyPass and PowerShell, if you will. Variables. So PSProfile lets you set global or environment variables, kind of like you probably might be doing on your profile itself. I know for my TFS stuff, I'll set probably a few different system variables, just so when I'm doing the REST API calls, I can mimic it as if I was running it from like a build pipeline myself, but not have to worry about replacing like my collection URL or something like that. So by default, it comes with a couple. Something that I've dealt with while working across different OSs like Mac and Linux, or just kind of the lack of like the computer name environment variable when you're not on Windows, or username or home. I think home's pretty present on every OS, but on like Linux and Mac, I think the username environment variable is just user, and then I don't think they have one built in for a computer name, if I remember correctly. So this will let you, it'll automatically set some of those environment variables for you based on the system.environment .NET class. So it'll pull the machine name, username, things like that. For the global variables that it sets by default, if you want to do some cool stuff with your path, you can specify a unique path separator. This is if you are getting pretty crazy with your prompts, but for now they're just there. I think this is like the default big angle directory separator that a lot of Powerline fonts or prompts use. And then this is just the default directory separator from the OS that you're on.
What does changing that actually do?
So by default, nothing. But let's say you were leveraging like a prompt and you wanted to just reference that specific variable. It's kind of just a way for you to have those as available settings. So say you have a prompt, and in that prompt you're separating your directory with one of those separators. Instead of having to update your actual full prompt, you can just update your PSProfile setting and it'll just change any prompts that leverage that single setting.
Gotcha.
So just kind of a convenience thing that I've messed around with and found it useful myself. So
Got it.
Command aliases. So command aliases are just that. So one of the things that I recommend doing for PSProfile is setting or aliasing just code to the open code function that comes with it. I highlighted it earlier on kind of being a replacement for the code CLI. It's still calling the code CLI underneath it, but it gives you some cool things that I'll demo in a bit. Symbolic links, if you want to make sure that you have a symbolic link created no matter what machine you're on, this will create them during that refresh process and just make sure they're there if they aren't already. The PS build path map, this is another any build.ps1 files that it finds underneath any of your project paths, it will add in here as a dictionary as well.
Sorry about that.
No problem. The settings property on the PSProfile object gives you some info. I am working on integrating some built-in PS readline support. Right now, I'm still working on it, so those would need to be done through like an external script or something like that. But expect those in the near future. PS version string length, there is a built-in function for PSProfile. It's one of the helper functions that lets you get kind of a short version of the current PowerShell version you're in. Right now, I'm in PowerShell Preview 7, Preview 4. If you have specific prompt characters, let's see. This will allow you to switch between certain things. It'll default to the default Git repo character, which I just have as an @ symbol. But if you do have a font that supports these other glyphs, you can switch your default prompt, you see, the font type over to one of these other ones, and it will allow you to leverage that within prompts that you have. If you ever need to view your configuration path, you can also do that easily. I'll show you what a default configuration looks like. There's pretty much nothing in it. So PSProfile uses jcool's configuration module to store its configuration. So it's stored in a configuration.psd1 file. By default, it'll be in your roaming profile directory. It does come with that one font that I mentioned, or that one prompt, sorry. Any plugin paths that have been added, it'll include those. By default, it'll look for anything in your PS module path, as well as the plugins folder within the distributed module folder itself. You can see any environment variables you have set, really just any setting that you have. And then I do not have the any nerd fonts or Powerline fonts within my normal code window, so that's why you're just seeing the Unicode blank boxes there. All right, then plugin paths is just some additional paths if you have them for plugins. PSProfile will hunt in those paths in case you have like a custom plugin you built that's maybe on like a file share or something like that. Plugins will list any plugins that you actually have set. Of course, it's blank right now. Last refresh will be the last time that PSProfile was refreshed. Then internal is just kind of a tracking place for PSProfile to monitor what it's doing, when it actually started its load, how long the load took, things like that. So let's get started with the configuration helper. So the configuration helper is really just your beginner point of entry into PSProfile. It'll walk you through each of the commands. It'll have a helpful blurb around each one, kind of show you the conceptual help, and then it'll give you a chance to configure anything where you should be able to configure. So we'll say we'll check out all the concepts. So command aliases. I want to add in that code command alias. So I'll choose Y to add it in. I want to alias open code. And I want my alias to just be code. Since that's what I'm typing already, just makes it a little bit natural just to continue that flow. It'll provide the command that you would run manually if you wanted to perform the exact same action. And it's basically building these up as we're going, and we'll have the opportunity to save this at the end. Don't need to add another one. If you need to exit this at any time, you can just hit X at any of the read host prompts. Modules to import. I want to import, let's say, Docker completion. And again, it'll tell you where to go. It should tell you the command to run. Sometimes the buffer on the code terminal is a little crazy. If you do want to view any of this conceptual help, it does give you the command to run for that as well. I want to make sure that AWS PowerShell .NET Core module is installed. So I'll double just make sure whenever I do a refresh that that module is installed to user scope, things like that. Don't need to add another one. For path aliases, if you're using path aliases in your prompt, this gives you the opportunity to add a custom one. I don't really need to add a custom one. I'm fine with just this, so we'll skip it. Plugin paths, you're typically not going to do that unless you're building custom plugins. Little tip here that kind of highlights the same thing. So we're not really going to need that here. Plugins. So it does come with a couple built-in plugins. It comes with one for AD commandlet completion for properties. One of the things that drives me nuts when I'm running like git AD user is I am struggling to like remember the available properties on like an AD user object. Same thing with computers and groups. So it comes with this AD completers plugin, which will give you tab completion for that. So we'll just add it. We'll skip that for now. Project path. So this is one of the things that I find most beneficial with PSProfile. I do want to add a project path. And I know my projects are at e/git. And that's the only project path I need to add for now. And I'll show you once this is done, the power that kind of brings with it. Prompts. So I don't have a custom prompt to add right now. I'm fine with just the existing one there, so we'll skip this for now. Script paths. So I do have some script paths that I like to add in, so we'll add those in. I want to add in my PS readline settings path. And let's add in, we'll add in convenience. And we're good on that. So init scripts. Init scripts are really just the script paths, but it contains the full script on your configuration itself. So let's say that I wanted to make sure that I can just move that script wherever. I don't need to worry about syncing a Git repo, anything like that. So this will make that just live on the configuration file, kind of bring you towards that single file. I'm going to skip this for now, and we'll walk through what that looks like when we actually do the conversion in a second. Secrets. So I'm not going to add in any secrets right now. Something to be aware of is that PSProfile does use the data protection API to encrypt secrets. If you're using PowerShell 6.1 or 6.0, it'll just throw an error. If you're using anything, I think 6.2 or later, there is kind of a way that it does obfuscate anything that you encrypt with secure string, like convert to secure string, things like that. But it's not as strong as the data protection API. So if you're on, I think Linux and Mac OS, using those commandlets comes with a risk, and there's a link there that will walk you through that pull request where they show some of the risks on doing that. So it's not essential to using PSProfile, but something to be aware of if you are not using this on Windows and want to leverage something like that. I haven't found any issues with it, but I'm also not in InfoSec, so I have personally no idea, but it's there and it's handy if you do want to use it, just be aware. Symbolic links, I'm not going to add any here for the essence of time, but if you wanted to say, make sure that C:/workstation existed and pointed at some deep folder on your user profile, this would be where you would set that up, and it'll just make sure that during a refresh, that symbolic link exists. I'm going to leave my variables as is for now, but if you did want to add in a variable, this will walk you through adding in an environment or a global variable, give you the value you want to add for it, and it'll store that right on your config. So power tools. There's not really anything to configure for these next few sections. So this will walk you through kind of what they are, really to show you the conceptual help on them. And it'll just have you press enter to continue. There are a few commands within PSProfile that are really built towards maintaining the configuration itself. This will walk you through that. Again, nothing to configure here, so we'll keep walking through. PSProfile does come with some helpers that walk you through, or allow you to do a few things. Copy parameters. Matt, I think this is the one that you had replied to, and it probably sparked the interest of me speaking here tonight. Copy parameters lets you place this value or this function in a dynamic parameter block of a function you're creating, and literally just copy all the parameters over from a script or another function. So on start build script is kind of where I use this. I wanted a way to be able to have my start build script really just reflect any parameters that I had on that build script itself, without having to call the build script directly, since the whole purpose is being able to not have to invoke the build script directly in your current session. So this gives you a way to do that. It is included with PSProfile, just as kind of something you can leverage as well, maybe if you're working on your own things. If you want to just pull it into your own module and just copy the code, the source code is available on GitHub. By all means, do with it what you will. I think it's MIT licensed, if I'm not mistaken, if I remember correctly. So feel free to grab any code that works for you. Get last command duration will just show you the timestamp that the last command ran, really useful in prompts. Get path alias will look at your path alias property, and if it sees anything in, let's say, your prompt, or if you just want to run it to get an alias for a long path, it will return that shortened path with the alias replacing where it needs to. Get PSProfile arguments. So if you are writing a custom plugin for PSProfile and you want to do things like add tab completion for project paths, things like that, this will let you do that. It's another deeper dive that we won't get into right now. Get PS version will let you get a short string of the version. Test if get, test if your current directory's Git repo and return some info, and then write PSProfile log will let you write back to PSProfile's built-in log from a custom plugin or what have you, if you wanted to keep that as like a really simple centralized logging solution. It has a couple meta functions. If you want to get the list of PSProfile commands, this lets you do that. Because of the way that PSProfile works, if you have it invoke an external script that imports a bunch of functions, those functions will look like they came with PSProfile itself, since those are happening during module import. So this will let you really just focus on what you would expect to get if you ran git command -module PSProfile. If you wanted to view only the imported commands that PSProfile imported, it has a function for that, and it just lets you get more info. And then if you wanted to get your PSProfile log, you can do that. So that should be it. You'll get a nice summary of the settings that you added. And if you would like to save your configuration, we'll go ahead and save this. And that was the configuration helper. If we look at our configuration file, we should see a little bit more. So we can see the script paths that we added here. Let's see. We know that we have a single module to install now, which is the AWS.NET Core module. We did add one plugin, and we should have a single project path, wherever it may be. There we go. All right, so if we actually do a refresh, we should see a lot of stuff fill out now. So if we say refresh PSProfile, we'll do verbose. So right now it's hunting down all of those projects, and we'll actually see this Git path map get filled out pretty nicely and immediately be able to take advantage of that. This is where I really like using PSProfile. So PSProfile in the Power Tools section, let's see, if I can pull it up here. Comes with a few kind of path navigation functions, really things that are focused on kind of replicating push location, pop location, things like that. And they're already aliased for you. So my typical workflow would be push. I can tab through those folder names for my repos. So let's say I want to push over to PEMencrypt. So now I can see that I'm in my PEMencrypt folder. I don't need to worry about the full path. You can also give it really just any path, and it'll respect it the same. It will just check that Git path map first for anything that was imported from your project path. So we can say PSG Suite. It'll look in there too, and everything is good. So for the build script function, so as I mentioned before, I do a lot of work with .NET libraries. So I wrote this command, start build script. This is also aliased as just BLD for short. My typical workflow will be running a build. So I'll say, let's build PEMencrypt. And so this help switch and update modules, these don't exist on that build function at all. These are actually on the build script that it's looking at for PEMencrypt. So if you have a bunch of extra parameters, this will just natively pull that in through that copied parameter helper command that it comes with. I don't need to worry about any of those right now, but they're really nice to have. I can say, compile it really quick. It'll pull in that validate set from the build script too for your tasks. Makes it really nice. You can walk through, if you use that verbose flag, see the command that it's actually running. Not really including a lot of the PS read line stuff. It'll run this in the AHL process for you. This should go pretty quick. So PEMencrypt is another module I wrote that is focused on being able to do asymmetric encryption and decryption with RSA keys. Something to where you don't have maybe the ability to have a full certificate. But it's a really handy module. We use it internally for sending RSA encrypted secrets to Lambda. and then Lambda contains that private key. So all we need to worry about for our developers that are using this is distributing a public key to encrypt things with. They don't need to be able to decrypt anything. And obviously with an RSA key, you can install it to your certificate store. So it does some cool things on that. But again, this happened all in a child process. This does build a class library in C#. Makes it so if I were to run my pasture test, it won't lock that file. I can clean it up after. Makes it really nice. So if you have existing profile content that you want to convert over to PSProfile, it has a lot of those built-in things that I touched on, like the ability to import specific modules during profile load. If you want to invoke external script files, it will do that. You can set command aliases like the code command that I'll kind of touch on in a second again. You can load custom prompts and then switch in between them. You can set those variables, and then it has those bonus features that kind of make sure you can keep your machine configured the way you want, even if you move to a new one. So install missing modules, create symbolic links that you expect, manage some prompts.
The screen went black.
Yeah, there we go. So profile items, I kind of walked through already how to add those using the configuration helper. In my previous profile, I was using a lot of those external script calls. I was dot sourcing stuff. I had my PS read line settings being set. So this really just gives you a way to add those. Configuration helper is one. If you wanted to, let's say, add anything, let me actually reload and actually get my PS read line settings so I can have menu complete again. I feel lost without it. All right, there we go. Much nicer. So immediately just reloaded my session and I had that external script invoked as soon as I was there, giving me my PS read line settings, a lot more peace of mind as soon as I'm on a new session. I'm back to it being in my comfort zone, if you will, and that's really what PSProfile is about. So the core commands for PSProfile are really just focus on three things: add, get, and remove. So if you want to add a new setting to your PSProfile, it's usually add-PSProfile ... Pretty easy to add. You can see if you're using menu complete or using get help, the individual or different ways that you can add things. So definitely check out the get help content for those. Let's see. So those would be how you would kind of convert existing profile help. So I think on my original profile, do I still have my profile here? So I was doing a lot of stuff. I was creating a log, adding a config file. I was kind of getting this base PSProfile configs, kind of the origin of it. I would set variables, path aliases, things like that. Pretty much the same thing that I am doing now in the actual module. Anything as far as like building my get path map, it would go through and hunt down those. This would take a long time because I was doing my project path hunt on every profile load, since this variable obviously doesn't exist throughout sessions.
Casey, wherever.
And then anything that I was actually invoking, like external scripts, it would just dot source them here too. So kind of took all this functionality and built it into PSProfile itself. So power tools. Confirmed script is valid. This is going to kind of walk through each of the functions that are in that power tool section. this will use the AST parser to actually check if your script has errors in it. It's a really easy way to just say, hey, I made these quick updates. I probably shouldn't be doing this directly in production, but I did. It is what it is. Let me just make sure that I didn't break anything in the process because I'm in Notepad or something weird. So confirm script is valid will let you just run that against an existing script, and you'll get kind of a nice, I'll just run it against one, a nice little report of whether or not there are errors.
And this is, so you said it's in Power Tools. Is that actually part of PSProfile or something that it imports?
It is. So Power Tools are kind of just one of the sections of PSProfile. I actually originally built them as like an included plugin, but it's probably the things that I use most from PSProfile outside of the configuration management, because it gives you a lot of those like tab completion functionalities. It's really just kind of these are the big quality of life functions that PSProfile has.
Got it.
So confirm script is valid, you'll get an error count, and if you do have errors, you'll have those in a nice array there, just for inspection, what have you. Enter clean environment. So this will let you actually go into that child process. You can pick your engine if you want. You can specify to import your module. The way I typically will build modules is I'll have a folder called build output in my repo root. This will look for that folder and then import a module from that, whatever the latest version is, into that clean environment. That's my usual workflow, and I've seen that in a few other places. If you have a different workflow that you want to accommodate for this, just let me know and I'd be happy to build in that support. An enter clean environment will be pretty quick, and it will just get me a really simple no profile environment. I will have some quality of life kind of tab completion things like PS readline settings. Right now I just type get-tab and it will just yell at me for lots of things. But once you're done, just exit and you're right back where you were. Format syntax. If you are active on Twitter, you've probably seen Matthias Jessen's post about formatting the actual get help content for PowerShell command syntax. So this will basically wrap that for you. So we'll say open code. Makes that just a little bit easier to read. It just uses the regex that Matthias built. Super simple, but when you need to figure out what parameters are applicable to the function you're looking at, it's a really quick way to view it in a nicer format. This is also alias to just syntax. So you can do syntax, then your command, and it also supports tab completion as well. So any available commands, you can just easily look them up right there.
Why didn't you do that with a formatter?
I'm sorry?
Why didn't you do that with a formatter? The way that that's actually rendered inside of PowerShell itself is a formatter, so the only thing you need to do to actually get that kind of view is basically change the type name on a PS object, getting help to that degree. I'm curious why regex, not that I dislike regex. I like regex actually quite a lot, but aside from little bits of perf, I don't see the why here.
So I'm definitely interested in doing that. So
I guess more to the point,
looking
can you
at-
get member this? Is it a string?
You're talking about the actual syntax. So
Yeah,
it's parsing out
syntax.
the get help response.
So if I
basically.
do syntax open code pipe to get member, is it a string?
Yes. Should.
Cool. Sync up offline and I'll teach you how to make it so that it's still an object and still has the same look.
Sounds good. So we can actually look at what that definition is in case you want to peek a little bit further. Nothing crazy.
That is incredibly unperformant. But let's also sync up with that offline.
Happy to. Alright. Get definition. It's what I just showed actually. So def, it's just doing git command and then grabbing the definition property from that. It also wraps it in the function just wrapper. Just normally get definition or get command not definition. We'll just return the actual function body. So if you wanted to view that just as an actual ready to copy function, it's there for you. If you wanted to view that in code, we'll use the actual code or open code wrapper, and I'll do -l ps1, and we'll open it as a temporary ps1 file that already has syntax highlighting ready to go. So that's something that the native code CLI tool won't do. It'll just always open as a text file. So this kind of gives you just a quality of life improvement on that.
And that code alias, do you get that by default with PSProfile, or was that something that you actually input?
Isn't code the exe?
Yeah,
So-
you aliased it.
Yeah, so there's I think on code on Windows comes with a code.cmd, which gives you the argument handling and stuff like that. It doesn't include that alias by default. When I was actually working on this, there were a number of people that really just didn't want to overwrite something that's core and default like that. So it's more just like kind of a trust thing. I've tested it with pretty much any of the code arguments that I could pass at it, and it handles it fine just through value from remaining arguments. So I definitely recommend it, but I also wanted a way to allow people to not be hard set on using that if they didn't want to.
Got
So
it.
you can just use open code instead of viewing the alias, but I haven't had any issues at all with the alias, and it's just easy for me to remember since I'm using it a lot.
Got it.
Get long path. So, so get long path. That will do any path expansion for anything you have in like your get path map. So get long path will again, actually make this bigger. It'll just return the full path from the get path map dictionary. This is also aliased to path. So if you wanted to leverage that kind of tab expansion from just normal things like, let's say, get child item. Makes it easy so you don't have to worry about remembering the full path to something in case it's super deep, what have you.
Can you show me the def for that too?
The depth?
The definition for your path function.
Yeah, absolutely. So-
okay.
A lot of this is really just grabbing the value from the dictionary that's on the PSProfile object itself.
Okay.
So it'll hunt through that. So if you just give it like path not, it'll return your parent working directory path.
Okay.
If it's on the dictionary, it'll return the value for that key. Otherwise, it'll resolve the path. It just has a lot of fallbacks on that.
Sure. So similarly to the other one, just to give you a good perf boost, you're probably going to want to use execution context session state, a resolve path from PS path instead of
Okay.
resolve path. Resolve path is also quite slow.
So
Okay.
to be fair, I don't think most of the stuff in this module is meant to be performance, since most of it is meant to be used.
It's a lot of
on-
interactive.
Not much
no,
of this is meant to
that-
actually be used in loops.
Yeah.
and that's a fair point though. One of the things that I do strive for is really to try to be as performant as possible when I can, because I'm constantly reloading my session. Something like path, as Travis mentioned, it doesn't really get, it's not too critical to have performance since I'm not running it like that.
Yeah.
I'd want to type the actual full command or full path. But again, I'm more than happy to learn myself. Install latest module. We'll look for and kind of force uninstall any versions of a module you have, and then just grab the latest version from the PowerShell gallery. It's not something that I do too often, but when I do want to do it, it's usually get module list available for that specific module name, piping that to uninstall module, and then grabbing the latest one. So more of just a convenience item. I'm not expecting every person to use every single piece of PSProfile, but it's just there in case you did want to use it. Open Code was that code CLI wrapper that I demoed. It'll do a lot of cool things if you want to see the actual code for that. This one's a bit longer.
Just a tad.
So this does also leverage that dictionary for your paths. So if you wanted to say open a specific project, you can just do code tab, and it will open a new window at that full path for you. If you wanted to say add an existing project to your workspace, you code -add to workspace or -a for short. Again, you'll get tab completion, and it will just add it over here to your workspace in your active window. So makes things really nice. If you're a Chef user like I am and have this so if you have a folder in your Git path map called Chef Repo, it will go through and also enumerate the cookbooks folder underneath it. So if you wanted to tab complete a specific cookbook name, I think I have like 150 or 200 that I deal with throughout my cookbook repository. This will let you do that as well. If you don't have that key, it just won't provide that parameter to avoid confusion.
What if, is that a common, like, is it common practice to name your Chef Repo, or?
You know, I haven't seen it named otherwise. That's what we have it named. The Chef tutorials have it named that, but it's not something that's hard set. It's kind of the same as any other Git repository. So if you wanted to name it something else, you can. This is just kind of what we do internally at my work.
Is there a way to configure that for a different Chef Repo name?
Not currently, but I can definitely add that. That would
Okay.
be something good to have in like a PSProfile setting, like a Chef Repo folder name or path even.
Yeah, I don't use Chef, but I can foresee that being useful to someone for sure.
Can you
For
go
sure.
actually to where you're loading the cookbooks? I kind of want to get a sense of like what they are and in terms of data content. Basically, I don't know if it needs to be limited to just cookbooks, but still trying to wrap my head around.
For sure. So for that particular one, I actually don't have any cookbooks on this PC right now.
Oh no, it's fine. But you had the code earlier that.
He was asking you to scroll up.
Yeah, that's all.
Got it.
So where's the part that handles cookbook loading? That part's
so
the join path.
it'll resolve the target from there, and then the actual, it does have a dynamic parameter that will look, let me see. So it'll pull a validate set just using get child item. Probably could be more performant. But yeah, this will just list the folder names underneath your cookbooks directory within your Chef Repo folder.
Okay.
Open item. So a lot of times I'll be working on like Mac, for example, and I'll run like start and then provide a folder path, and it won't work since the provider is different. The typical way to do that, it would be like using invoke item. Open item gives you that same tab completion. And I wanted to not use proxy commands for this, instead of just proxying like invoke item, to be able to handle it, for various reasons. But this will let me open a specific folder. This popped up over here. If I wanted to just open the current path that I'm in, it lets me just type open. Obviously, open is an alias that's included just for open item.
Is it also defined on Linux?
Work fine on Linux, work fine on Mac, since it is using invoke item under the hood.
Were you asking, is open already a defined?
Oh no, I'm just curious what exactly he's doing. I mean, the answer was given.
Got it.
Pop path is so to kind of preface that, push path is basically push location, but gives you tab completion for those get path map keys as well. Since push location in this context is happening within the module scope, pop path is necessary in order to be able to pop location, since just running pop location, you're running it outside of that scope. To kind of give you a quick demo, push is alias to push path. So if I do pop location, it's not going to do anything. Pop will get you back to where you need to go, or pop path.
So, question on these short paths that you're using, those are actually honored by all existing like path commands, right? Because they're actually aliased at the power. They're not.
No, so that's why I have those kind of helper commands in there that wrap those other commands. Like I'll show you.
Oh, I got it. I thought you were implementing it at like the level of tilde, for example, for desktop, where they actually do honor it.
No, not at that level. I would definitely be interested in doing that if it's doable, but I wasn't finding a way to easily do that on my end.
Got it.
So go ahead.
I was just saying, like, with the specific limitation here about its own module stack, I would almost stick with push and pop location. You know, I don't see myself using this pair as much.
It's fair.
Do you have an equivalent to get location dash stack?
No.
So that can be handy.
Okay.
So for those not in the weird obscure know, basically when you push and pop, in addition to basically it keeping a stack, you can access that stack and thus say, all right, try all the locations I have popped into. So I do that with a few scripts.
Well, that would be fair, and I'd probably add it in as like get path, or maybe even as something like a parameter on get long path or something like that. But that's definitely a good idea. Start build script I demoed a little bit earlier. That'll let you target any build script in that PS build path map. It will also allow you to just specify a direct script file path if you didn't want to use something that's kind of aliased. So if you did want to point it at some specific script, you can do that too, and it'll pick up the parameters from that script just fine. Test regex will let you test a regex pattern against a string pretty quickly. It'll return the portion of the string that actually matched against the regex. So if you wanted to test it against an array of strings, you can.
So this is where I have to slightly call out a thing that I've been seeing here.
Okay.
Mainly because now you're accidentally like 2 inches from my toe. You're using a lot of commandlet names that are, for lack of a better way to put it, overly global. Unless your module is purely regex oriented, can you please leave the regex noun for those who build regex modules? I'm
That's
not
fair.
using test yet, but I would rather people not mentally whack-a-mole. And basically what you got here is a lot of different commands that exists in other modules already by name. So that will probably be confusing for people to try to adopt it.
That's a fair point.
So, I mean, it's not at all a unique to you problem in module design. In fact, it's one of those, it'd be great if everybody checked the gallery first before people throw them up. But, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's the point of like a loud clobber, right? In case there are accidental collisions like this.
I mean, yeah, in theory. In practice, you're still talking about a load order pane for the individual. So suppose they have PSProfile loaded, okay, and then 2 or 3 items into their profile, they load a module that has its own test regex. Which one wins and where? This will get confusing.
It's fair.
So, sorry to call it out, but it is, yeah, I just released one that uses basically everything but test. I didn't keep test because I ended up being able to write it in other commands. So.
Gotcha. No worries. No, that's a very valid point. I definitely appreciate the feedback.
It looks interesting.
So as I kind of highlighted earlier, most of the Power Tools functions greatly benefit from having at least one project path. A lot of them do focus around that tab completion aspect and that alias expansion. So it makes just navigation throughout throughout your projects pretty quick, or invoking build scripts, things like that. So again, when you're refreshing PSProfile, it'll look for any Git repo folders within that project path array, and any build.ps1 scripts by default. So PSProfile itself is built to be extensible. It does include a couple of helpful plugins. It does come with that 80 completers plugin, and then another one for handling Git aliases. So a sample Git alias one, I use a lot of Git aliases myself. These are basically the Git aliases that I do use.
Ye?
I'm sorry?
I said ye? Your Git foo is strong.
Thank you. I will say that a lot of these I picked up elsewhere, but most of them are things that I wrote, and they're just super handy. So the Git aliases plugin that does come with PSProfile allows you to ensure that those aliases are present from wherever machine you're at. That way, a lot of people kind of start depending on those aliases, because trying to remember something like this huge log command, it can be a little bit painful. So let's just make sure you can transport those as well. So if we actually run this, I have that here. Again, my configuration itself, let's see, doesn't include anything other than my 80 completers on that plugin. So I'll go ahead and just .source that. And we can see all those aliases added in. So the plugins will accept 2 values, just the name of the plugin and then an argument list that you want to pass to it. That argument list can be an array of arguments. And plugins themselves can be a script file, just parameterized or not. Or they can actually be a module that you install from the gallery if you want to treat it as a plugin.
Can you actually show the content of that Git aliases.ps1?
Yeah, absolutely. I did show it just on that last slide.
Oh, got it. Okay. And then down at the
Yeah.
bottom, the actual command that added it to your profile was...
Add PS
Oh, okay.
profile plugin.
Got it. I'm
Yeah,
just blind. My bad.
No worries. And then it's just passing that variable that I added this hash table with.
So also for syncing up on offline later, there are more elegant ways you can basically expose hookability. One's attribution on an individual script that'll allow you to basically scan through whatever paths, find, oh, here are my PSProfile plugins. The other one's basically modules or functions that self-register their metadata. But yeah, take up offline.
Yeah, for sure.
Uh,
Definitely interested. All right, so this wraps up the content that I wanted to cover with PSProfile. So kind of recap, we covered what PSProfile is, some of the goals the module has and why I developed it, how to get started using the built-in help as well as the configuration helper, how to convert existing profile content over to PSProfile, using those power tools to work quickly, and then how to extend PSProfile with custom plugins. So that was PSProfile. I hope you guys enjoyed, and again, I definitely appreciate the feedback on it. I'm always looking to grow myself, and anything that I can make or use to make my tools more performant is a huge win for me, and I think for everybody else too.
Looks interesting.
Awesome. Does anybody have any questions in the room?
Yeah, how are you loading different fonts with PSProfile? Because I saw that you were doing that in Terminal, but you said it wasn't doing it in VS Code, so I'm just curious about that.
Did you
So
catch that?
PSProfile itself isn't loading any fonts.
Okay.
It's just I have a different font set for my code terminal versus the editor.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so if I actually switch my prompt, I'll switch over to my secret HQ prompt. So this is that actual prompt. If I did want to update, say, my current setting to indicate that I am using a nerd font, which I am, it's APS profile setting. So we can actually see that my Git branch icon changed for the Git repo that I'm in to specify that I'm using a nerd font.
Interesting. And that's just switching the font in the terminal itself?
It's not switching the font, it's switching the character of that Git branch representation.
So
Yeah, so
I missed this part, but do you allow for stackable prompts, or do you just basically allow to WAP out and WAP in prompts?
So right now the prompt is really just the same as if you were to write like a prompt function.
Yeah.
We can actually look at what that looks like in code.
Yeah. So in a very, very, very old module called IcePack, I overrode prompt, and the way I did it there was basically finding whether you were using the default prompt or not, and if you were switching it over to whatever was in a series of arrays. So basically, then once I had that established, instead of modifying my prompt directly, I just basically could add items to that array in a given place. So I could say, oh, put this at the beginning of my prompt, or put that little piece at the end of my prompt. So,
For sure, it's kind of similar to like what like Powerline is doing, things like that. If you've ever messed with it, just making that prompt like modular. It's something that I want to build in. Right now, this is just a way to store various prompts and kind of switch between them quickly to show you actually what that looks like.
and out of dumb curiosity, you still have to put that in scripts to process in the module itself, right?
Yeah, you're talking about how to actually load that prompt. It's creating a script block and then invoking it.
No, I mean that my recollection is you couldn't have a prompt directly loaded inside of a module. You had to make sure the prompt was loaded outside of the module, but when the module loads.
It depends. So if you load it at the global scope, it'll still stay at the end. That's how I'm doing it.
Okay.
So basically, I'll show you what that configuration looks like for that prompt, for example. It's up here. So right now it's just a string. What it'll do is it will wrap this in that function global prompt, create a script block from it, and then invoke it really quickly.
All right.
So, for example, I just switched that prompt. By default, switching a prompt will set your default prompt. So I should actually see that prompt on my new session persisting. And there it is. So to show you an example of what a full configuration looks like. Boo.
What does the -save parameter do?
So most of the functions that will update your configuration in any way, usually like the add -PSProfile functions, will include that -save parameter. So that way you can test basically like if you add a command alias or a project path, but you may not want to actually save your profile, it'll load it to the active session, but not actually write that back to your configuration file. So
you have to pass -save to write it back to the config file?
Yeah, if you wanted to do it all in one command, you could also, let's say you ran something and you actually liked what it did, you could just run save PSProfile,
Got it.
and it'll just save it the same.
Got it, got it.
So yeah, full, let's see, full config. Open this up. It is not liking that for some reason. I'll deal with that later. It's not a big deal. But a full prompt or a full configuration to kind of show you what that looks like is can be a bit longer. So I have a number of different prompts on here. I have some secrets. So typically, you wouldn't be actually looking at the configuration file. Obviously, secure strings aren't the most beautiful thing to look at. Things like that.
Are you sure that portion works on Linux?
Yes. So
that I'd be incredibly surprised at. I thought the secure strings just crap the bed on Linux.
So I touched on this a little bit earlier, but on PowerShell Core 6.0 and 6.1, you're absolutely right. 6.2 and later still don't have the data protection API. So there's actually a link. Let me show you really quick. So it kind of gives you that warning saying, hey, these secrets are encrypted with the data protection API. They did add kind of a shim on PowerShell Core 6.2 and later where they'll obfuscate it a bit. And the link to the pull request where they actually walk through that is here for you to check out. It's not really recommended because of that lack of security on non-Windows machines. And I did highlight that here when you're actually using it. But if you are just containing things for your own personal use, maybe like a test credential or a simple API key, like you get API key or something like that, it will obfuscate it enough, in my opinion, to where you can probably do that safely. Just be aware that when you're on a non-Windows machine, this may not be the encryption solution for you. You may want to do something a little bit stronger, something like that. So,
would say that it's still a lot of information to have in a particular single file, and I don't know that. I mean, what's your compelling reason to have it all in one file?
Single pane of glass kind of approach. That's kind of why I developed the module initially.
Okay.
It's just to make sure that I had things that I was pulling in from multiple different sources contained. I don't expect people to use every single bit of PSProfile. I think it has a lot of nice things for people to benefit from, but I would be surprised if somebody were to use every single piece. Kind of like the AWS commandlets are a good example. Prior to them breaking those out, you know, if you're using that module, you're getting 5,000 plus commands. You're probably not breaking a fraction of those, but they're there because they all kind of tie in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is clear from the allusion to PowerShell, IcePack, but I've been down this rabbit hole. You need to scope exactly what it's going to do, in my opinion. Having something that has an unbounded scope creep eventually creates a circumstance where your module kind of becomes both top heavy and really hard to logically maintain for yourself and others. So you've got a gigantic grab bag right now. I would love it in smaller pieces.
That's fair.
And I unfortunately and cruelly have found this is what people want of my own large grab bags as well. So I sympathize with the pain in the butt of making it happen. So, but yeah, a lot of the grab bag looks very interesting.
Thank you.
No other questions?
I don't want to leave on that note. That's just kind of
Well, I don't have anything else. Thank you very much, Nate. This is awesome.
Yeah, it looks very cool.
I'm glad you guys enjoyed. I'm always available if you want to reach out for questions, and definitely ping me about those performance improvements, and feedback like that is incredibly valuable to me. So I definitely appreciate the very honest feedback.
I will definitely reach out. Like I said, I've been down this rabbit hole. It's fun. It just also can be scope creepingly stressful.
For sure. No, it totally makes sense.
Crap, 15 more functions I really want to have.
No, and probably like those power tools bits where you saw a lot of that scope creep, I'm sure those would be probably best left in an actual plugin, for example, something where somebody could add in that specific functionality. So I totally see that, and that's kind of why I wanted to do that extensible plugin route. But again, those functions were, I guess, so core to my own usage that I just felt compelled to include them. But it makes sense to have those kind of separate in its own little piece.
Yes, indeed. Cool stuff.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Well, thank you, Nate. Thank you for the presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nate. That was
Yeah,
awesome.
thanks.
Of course.
Alrighty. Well, we will let you go. Thanks so much.
You guys have a good night.
You too.
You too. The recording is up on YouTube. I will send it out. We did not have a recording from last month because I just never got it working, basically.